It's frustrating that I was only given 3 minutes to talk about John. So first I'm going to tell you that what some of you may not know, John was actually primarily responsible that the Peace Center even exists. When Steve Hodges was graduating from seminary and they both showed up at a conference at St. Paul's Episcopal Church that William Sloane Coffin was at, Steve was sort of trying to figure out what to do, and John suggested the Peace Center. So if you wonder if he's sort of core to it, no doubt about it. If I ask whoever is in this room, I won't, but to stand up if John was the one who got you involved in Peace Center, I haven't thought there would be a fair number of us. I certainly am one of them. And John always has sort of a subtle way of doing it. How would you like to do a little reading over this? And John, the other thing about John is that he really lives what he believes. So, you know, a lot of people went out to protest when the Iraq War started. But John kept going, Friday after Friday after Friday. And I suspect there were many Fridays you were by yourself. Maybe Tom Cleary was there too. But John would be there by himself. I mean, he does, it's not showy, but it's constant and consistent. You know, John went every year for many years to the School of the Americas protest. I mean, there are lots. I'm not going to go through. I have 3 minutes. But here's the thing that I think we should have. John does all these things, and they're fabulous in their heart. But here's the thing John does that I most appreciate, and that's the tedious, boring, detailed stuff of keeping the books and telling you. It was John who figured out that nobody needed to have a heart attack in July because there was no money, because there would be money in November. You know, he mapped that out. Now that's not very exciting, and nobody ever writes articles in the newsletter about that, but that's the kind of thing that John has done over and over and over. And it's what really keeps the Peace Center going. You know, you all keep it going because of your energy and your interest, but none of that would be happening if John hadn't done those kind of boring, detailed things. So, thank you, Engineer John.
Almost entirely. What I could stress, though, is that, well, I just feel really pleased and honored to be asked to speak, however briefly, because I really value, as she was describing, John's contribution to the Peace Center, but also just his contribution to my evolution, I guess, as a person growing into more and more understanding about peace and peacemaking. I don't want to repeat the things that Wendy has said, but I do need to mention that John, from my point of view, has been particularly instrumental in stimulating people to be willing to make the trip, the pilgrimage, down to Georgia, to Columbus, to the School of the Americas for the demonstrations there every November. I saw him in those operations as basically the leader, and as a matter of fact, at least on one occasion, he was instrumental in getting me out of jail, which was really a nice role that he played, having bail money for me. When you think about, at least when I think about the Peace Center, I think about my various trips through, I don't know, more than 30 years, coming to the Peace Center somewhat sporadically to do various tasks, almost invariably, John would already be there, and he would be involved with completing the tasks that were needing to be done, whether it was installing some shelving or perhaps troubleshooting some kind of technical problems with a computer, or maybe just putting out a newsletter that was due at that time. He was just seemingly always on hand. That kind of fits with what Wendy was describing, with his hands-on approach to the nuts and bolts of keeping the operation flowing. And I think that I can summarize for me how I see John and the Peace Center. I see him historically as the face of the Peace Center. And I guess now, after tonight, I'm going to have to add another twist to that. Now I see him as the face of the Peacemaker of the Year.
And I met John about 25 years ago when I started dating one of his sons. Pete is known to his parents affectionately as number 7. Sometime later, when Pete and I decided to get married, my mother suggested Fort Monroe Officers Club for the reception. Now Pete, knowing that his parents would object, decided to let me suggest this to his parents without giving me any heads up. So I made my suggestion, and it was received with laughter from Nancy and a thoughtful smile from John. After a long pause, he spoke very slowly. He said, "I'm afraid that will not be possible." And I asked if they had objections to the place, and he said, "Yes, we do, but it's not just that, it's simply not possible." More laughter from Nancy, and I was very confused. Finally, Nancy filled me in. She said, "We protested a while back at Fort Monroe, and we are not legally allowed to on Fort Monroe anymore." And John said, "But you certainly can have it there. We just will be unable to attend." At the time, I thought he was being facetious, but now that I know him better, I realize that would have been a fine solution to him. It would have been one last wedding reception that he had. We did find another place. Through the years, I've gotten to know John, and I've learned so much from him. I saw a commercial just the other day. I think it's a Verizon commercial that says, "Everybody wants more. Nobody ever stomps their foot and demands less." And I actually yelled back at the television, "I know a man who does." He always stomps his foot and demands less. It is the resounding message that he's trying to teach all of us, is that we can do more with less, and we should do more with less. He takes it to heart, and he lives the bumper sticker, "Live simply so that others may simply live." One thing that Wendy mentioned is his attention to detail and how much that brings, and what also he brings is ideas. He's a strange combination of someone who can follow through with that painstaking detail, but he also has the grand ideas. One of his projects that I've just gotten to hear about over the years was an idea he came up with, and let me give you a little background. Maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we joined a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, here in Richmond. John's idea, he found it and said, let's get involved with this. And he partnered up with a farmer named Charlie Collins, who's a very gifted, talented farmer who uses sustainable practices and a very efficient practice of drip tape, which uses very little water to irrigate the fields. John, seeing the abundant, bountiful harvest that this farmer was able to produce with a very small amount of land and a very small amount of water, got an idea, a really simple idea. Wouldn't this be great in Haiti? He'd been traveling to Haiti for years. He was partnering with a man named Gabriel Talis in a small village called Jacksonville that Gabriel called home. He'd been working with him for years, done wonderful things like helped to build a school that is now still thriving today. And he thought, one of the biggest problems they have is they're hungry during the dry season. Wouldn't it be amazing if they could have a community garden? All they need is drip tape and some knowledge, somebody to help them. So he talked to Charlie, his friend the farmer, and got him to agree to consult to help start this project. He talked to Gabrielle, who is an amazing person who gets so much done, and he agreed to organize the project and to supervise its implementation. And John, the detail man, decided, well, I'm going to get that drip tape to you. I'm going to get the equipment that you need to install that irrigation system. He found a supplier, he got it shipped, it got to Haiti, and the earthquake hit. And the shipment got lost. John followed that shipment for months, and he found it. And he got it delivered. And that garden happened. They built a garden, and they had their first dry season harvest. I don't know exactly when, several years after the earthquake, I know it happened. It is a difficult project. There's lots of issues. There's all sorts of things. They had goats eating the produce, and they had to get the families together. John and Gabby have worked through it, and they are, it has its ups and downs, but it's an amazing combination of skills that got that to happen with a very small number of people. John being the idea man and the detail man. So that type of thinking and that type of action is just, to me, amazing. I know I'm about to run out of my time, so. John's commitment to peace begins with his belief that we all have a right to pursue the fulfillment of our basic needs. And equally important, none of us has the right to fulfill our wants if those wants deprive another of their basic needs. And as a world community, we have the responsibility to protect the rights of others. John lives his life in a way that instructs all of us in how to pursue peace and justice. Thank you, John.
Going through all of these, and I think for me, I said it in the newsletter, the theme is that a lot of times we look to those role models for us that are like Gandhi and Dr. King and people that we feel like we could never live up to. But there are people among our list that, I'm going to get choked up here, because we also lost Tom Cleary this year. And there are people among us, and every time I say his name, I get because there are people among us that, for me, are role models, and are people that I've looked up to over the years. And John Gallini is one of those people. I haven't seen him a lot of times, but he's one of those people throughout the years that has really been a role model for me of the type of person that day after day after day, that you know that he is working for peace, that he's out there working for peace in his life. And so for me, it's that day-to-day working for peace that for me is consistent with he's consistent with his life and what he preaches. So about 7 or 8 years ago, I guess it was, I asked John and Alicia to come to one of my classes to talk about personal consumerism, and that was the reason why that's the thing I struggle with, that I spend money that I know that I don't live the simple lifestyle that I would like to live, but I know that John lives that kind of life that he preaches, and Alicia. And so I asked them both to come to my class because you want somebody to talk about something that is living that lifestyle, and I think they both do that. And so that's what was important for me about John. And I know we've all said this over again, and I'm just sort of repeating it, but that's for me is what's been so important about having people like that in our community, that they live what they're preaching, and that they're peacemakers, and that we have this role model for peacemakers among us. And there are many of you among us that I could point to and say that you've been role models for me here as well, not just John. But the thing about John is that, and I have to say this as well, we were reading this week in one of my classes, we were reading Dr. King's Transformed Nonconformist. And he says in there that a lot of people are just nonconformists, and they just want to be nonconformists, and they want to rebel just to rebel. And maybe they're, in the civil rights movement, there were probably a lot of people that were rebelling just because for the power or the glory or whatever of being leaders in the civil rights movement. But a transformed nonconformist is a person who is transformed on the inside and doesn't do the things that they do for the power and the glory. They do it because it comes from within. Peacemaking comes from within. And that's what I think about when I think about you, John, and some of the other people in the room as well, but you especially. So thank you.